Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning.
Good afternoon and good evening from the United Kingdom. I'm here with Lewis. Don't call me Blackpool. Brackpool, how are you, young man?
I'm very well. I think we should. I think I need to change the photo. I'm looking rather different these days.
Yeah, you're looking a lot more chavenly, if that's a word. There's a lot of fake names going around here, Rebel News. They're real names, but I don't believe them. Lincoln J, Lewis Brackpool. I don't really believe these are your last names. But apparently they are. They've proven it to me. Welcome to the Rebel News Daily live stream. We're on Rumble, Super U, Getter, YouTube. I'm missing something. Odyssey is where I'm missing, and you can pay us for your chat on Rumble, Super U, Odyssey, and we will read them on air. Questions, comments, remarks, songs, whatever you want, we will read them on air, and you can interact with us that way. rebelnews.com/livestreams is the best place to get the best feed every single day, and Lewis Brackpool is with me, and he wants you to know that Doug Ford is very confusing these days, the Premier of Ontario. Have you seen this video of him, Lewis, from yesterday, where he's doing a complete 180?
Yeah, I saw briefly. I didn't watch the full thing, which I'm sure we're going to dive into.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my thoughts on this is that we've been seeing politicians doing U-turns all of a sudden. It's almost like they've had, firearms to their heads and they're in like a hostage situation for so many years now, and it's almost like the curtains are starting to open, and they feel like the shackles have been untied from them, and they can now start to say what they want because the narrative has switched. That's my take on it. But it's a very interesting switch we're starting to see with these pesky politicians.
Yeah, Doug Ford generally seems like he is sticking to a script in front of him. That's why they have the second angle. You know, that second angle where you can't tell that they're reading. But yesterday, I'm not going to be too mean right off the top, but a reporter from CTV News named Colin DeMello asked him basically, what happens if restaurants are harassed for having a vaccine passport or not having it? It's the general mainstream media question is, why are we doing this? It seems like it's too soon. And Doug Ford, for once, didn't seem like he was following a script. Seemed like he was actually talking genuinely. But you have to juxtaposition that with what you were saying, which is how can we trust it when the narrative switches so quickly? So let's go ahead and play this, and then we'll talk about it a bit more.
You can go to Costco, you can go to Walmart, you can go shopping. You don't know if the person has a shot beside you or not, but we also know that it doesn't matter if you have 1 shot or 10 shots, you can catch COVID. See, the Prime Minister has triple shots, and I know hundreds of people with 3 shots that caught COVID. We just have to be careful. We've got to always make sure we wash our hands and move forward. But, Colin, we can't stay in this position forever. We got to learn to live with this and get on with our lives. I bet if I asked every single person in this room, do you want these damn masks or do you want them off? They want them off. They want to get back to normal. They want to be able to go for dinner with their families. And there's every single person, including myself, knows people that are unvaccinated. Sure, there's the rebel rousers, and then there's just hardworking people that just don't believe in it. And that's their choice. This is about, again, our democracy and freedoms and liberties. And I hate as a government telling anyone what to do. We just got to get moving forward and get out of this and protect the jobs. I think a lot of people call them, probably yourself too, everyone's done with this. Like, we are done with it. Let's start moving on and cautiously. And, we've followed the rules, all of us, like 90% of us, for over 2 years. The world's done with it. So let's just move forward.
So a couple of things there, Lewis. One is, what's so funny, Lewis?
Oh, it's just, it's funny. I'm trying to word things carefully because we're still on YouTube. But we were done with this a long time ago, I think, is what I'm just laughing at. So, but yes, carry on, Andrew.
The problem here, I think, is 2 or 3-fold. One, how can you trust him when he turns on a dime so quickly? That's the first thing. After all these restrictions, how can you trust a person who's turned so quickly when they were so adamant about, just my friends, just do your part, I'm morbidly obese, etc., etc. The second thing is this falls in line with the whole World Economic Forum Klaus Schwab thing. Like the exact timeline they talked about, all the other leaders are doing it except for Justin Trudeau. He's having a hard time. He really wants the world to be a stage. But all the other Western countries that are part of the World Economic Forum, the leaders and the companies, they're all doing the same thing, obviously. So, excuse me. So that's another reason why you shouldn't trust it. But then on the other hand, you've got a guy coming up here and he sounds really genuine, so it's hard to tell whether this is, him just finally having enough, or, I don't know, did somebody tell him to do this? I don't even know. It's so hard to tell at this point, Lewis, because you've got the federal conservatives who want to end the restrictions all of a sudden, but now they're against, blockades. You've got Doug Ford, who's like, let's go even further and end everything else provincially. But then you've got Justin Trudeau, who says himself and the NDP want to continue the federal mandates. He's now putting himself in a position where he can basically arrest or seize the bank accounts of anyone who disagrees with the government. It's a really strange thing going on here, Lewis, and I think most people are probably confused as to who they can trust in the government. All of a sudden, the Quebec party is against all this stuff, and they're voting with the Conservatives. They're always going their little own way, and then 2 weeks earlier, Jagmeet Singh, the federal leader of the NDP, was saying it's time to come up with a plan to end the lockdowns, and then he votes against ending the mandates. It's just a really confusing time. Lewis, do you think they're doing this on purpose? Do you think it's the global plan? What do you think?
It is difficult to say, isn't it, Andrew? From an outsider's perspective, it seems to me like there are some politicians that have genuinely just had enough. They're kind of sick of playing the game, as you will. But then again, it's very, very hard to trust politicians these days, isn't it? I think this has been the case for decades because of their track record. I don't know. That seemed pretty genuine to me. I mean, maybe I'm being naive and I could be wrong, but that seemed pretty genuine. But at the same time, the global stage is still an act. Like you've mentioned about the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, they're still in play. They're still moving the pieces. I don't know how spicy we can go just yet, but they're still moving the pieces. The chessboard still isn't complete. The game isn't complete yet, if that makes sense. So, who knows? And it's still a bit of a strange, what's the word I'm looking for? Uneasy sort of times. So yeah, my take is that there are probably some genuine politicians that have had enough. But my take is that as well, I can't.
It's so hard
really
to trust
weird.
them, right?
It's so hard, but at the same time, it's easy. No, I can't say it. I can't say it because it's just too difficult. Well, I think I'm in the same boat as you, maybe.
What I want to point out, though, is Doug Ford's whole little speech yesterday, as much as if he's honest, we can agree with it, is he's basically admitting all of his provisions and all of his mandates and restrictions, they didn't work. They don't make any sense. Yeah. So you can go to a grocery store, you don't know if somebody's vaccinated. So why the restrictions in other places? He talks about vaccines, and we probably can't even talk about that on YouTube. But he goes on to say, we all know somebody with something. It's like Ilhan Omar. Some people did something. But he says, we all know somebody who can still spread the something. This is so stupid. I hate YouTube so much. Yeah. Like so much. We can't even speak the truth. But we can show, and I'm going to talk about it right once we get off, but we have a video of Klaus Schwab now that we're mentioning him from 2016. He's basically talking about how wonderful Canada would be to implement a bunch of this stuff. So let's go ahead and play this because we're on the topic of this, and Klaus Schwab, we know, evil, Dr. Evil for the world. Let's play this, please.
Prime Minister, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Doesn't sound evil at all.
Doesn't, not at all.
As you know, the theme of this annual meeting is Mastering the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I couldn't imagine anybody who could represent more the world which will come out of this fourth industrial revolution. It certainly will be a world, hopefully, not certainly, hopefully, if we take the right decisions, which will be a diverse world characterized by plurality. It will be a world which will combine significant investments
like a child in class.
into the future, into our soft and hard infrastructure.
Oh, yes, Klaus, I understand.
With fostering entrepreneurial activity, at the same time social responsibility. It will be a young world. It will be a digital world. Now, who could represent
Oh my God.
such a world better?
Sounds like he's
than
passing
you,
on to his
Prime
heir here.
Minister?
Yeah,
We are very
that's
glad
weird.
that at the beginning of this meeting, you are talking to us to represent also a new, open Canada. I want to use this opportunity also to thank our Canadian constituency, which always has been a very loyal and very much
Oh my
engaged
God.
constituency here at the Forum.
You've been loyal
But
to
now,
what? Like,
I
it's supposed to be
with you,
yeah.
an
together
economic
with our
forum.
constituents, Prime Minister.
If you took this exact audio and like changed it a little bit and you put it to one of like the high-ranking generals for the Empire and Star Wars, it'd pretty much be exactly the same thing. But for imagine somebody saying that they've been one of the most loyal people to a group of economists, like an economic forum. You've been very loyal to the Olympic Committee. Like, what does that even mean? That sounds so evil. And he's sitting there listening like a child in grade 3 English class who loves their teacher or something. And what does he call them? Techno future, and a wonderful techno future for Canada. And when we were talking about this clip earlier, I'm sure his handshake is very strong, Justin Trudeau's, as they, like they probably got cuts on their hands, some sort of satanic. Anyways, it reminded me I saw a trailer for a movie that looks really bad called Neon Vampires, and I don't know if we can pull this up, but that's the first thing that came to mind. Whether it's what's the Keanu Reeves video game? We're in the future, Cyberpunk, but it reminded me of
Cyberpunk.
reminded me of whatever Neon Vampires was supposed to be. Looked like one of the worst movies ever. I think we're pulling up a picture now. Can you just pull up some B-roll or a picture of that, please, producer? Because this is the true future Justin Trudeau wants right here.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm so excited to see this.
We also have coming out of the United States talking about Canada. Oh, here we are. It looks terrible. Like I don't know what the story is, but they're vampires with neon eyes and stuff, and it looks bad. This isn't even as bad as what I saw because they had like actual neon eyes. But yesterday outside the Canadian consulate in New York City, there was 2 groups that actually were protesting against Justin Trudeau. I wrote an article for rebelnews.com about it because one of them's like an anti-lockdown freedom group and a mothers group, I think they were, and they were protesting quite loudly, megaphones and all, outside of the Canadian consulate in New York City yesterday. And if we can pull up the video of this girl talking, there she is. A lot of people like this girl, what she has to say. She's part of one of the groups. I don't know too much about them, so don't quote me on it, but she just seems to be out there, and they're disagreeing with the Emergencies Act that Justin Trudeau is implementing. Let's play this, and we'll get your reaction, Lewis.
So Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergency Act. Do you want to send them a message?
Yeah, this is Joel for New York City. I stand with Canada, I stand with America, and I stand with the rest of the world. I have a message to the useless Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Listen, you don't own Canadians. You have no right to do this. You're violating human rights. You're taking over people's livelihood. And it's time for you to stop it. Canadians must continue to stand the hell up. When we say no, the game stops. The power is in the people. There's not one man that can have power over us because our power does not come from men, it comes from God. And they have no right to do this. Canadians continue to stand the hell up and do not stop. Until you get back your freedom, which was God given to you, you don't stop. And Justin Trudeau, for treason, you have violated people. You are a traitor to every Canadian out there. That's what I have to say.
So Justin Trudeau invoked...
Justin Trudeau. So obviously there's some opinions out there in New York City with their freedom of speech that they're able to vocalize, whereas in Canada, you'd probably be shut down by the Prime Minister's office. But we were looking at the Emergencies Act producer earlier today and yesterday as well as they implement it. And there's a clause about the revocation, continuation, and amendment of declaration. And I don't know, Lewis, how many people know this because it takes actually going and reading the act. And if you scroll past the part that says we can do whatever we want as long as we declare it to be unsafe for you, there's actually a part in there about how it can be revoked. And I know there's supposed to be review after 7 days, I believe. But of course, they can pass that. They have the NDP on their side. And then after it's supposed to last 30 days. But there's a revocation and declaration of emergency there. And what it says, I believe, is that possibly 20 MPs could put an end to it if they reasonably and vocally stand out against it. Do you want to read that for us in your lovely accent, Lewis?
Yeah, sure. Is it from the part that says vote or just above?
Just highlight
a declaration.
There, producer.
Yeah, if you could do that.
Can you highlight it for him?
Is that all right?
There you go.
So, signed by not less than 10 members of the Senate or 20 members of the House of Commons, as the case may be, is filed with the Speaker thereof, that House of Parliament shall take up and consider the motion within 3 sitting days after it is filed.
There you go. So they could do that today. 10 senators or 20 MPs. Why aren't they doing that? Maybe they are. Maybe they're going to do it today. But it's to be considered. Maybe they did it. I don't know. But I don't think they have, and I don't think people are aware that if they just got 10 senators or 20 conservative MPs up there and say this is why we think it doesn't need to be stopped, it can be considered by the Speaker of the House. Then I don't know if it comes to a vote after that. What's this you're showing us here? The Ottawa Police Service? Okay, there's apparently a flyer being handed out in Ottawa today, and what does this say? Is it saying this exact thing? It's saying that you have to leave.
You must leave the area now. Anyone blocking streets or assisting others. Hang on.
I can do it. I'll take it from there. Are committing criminal offense and you may be arrested. You must immediately cease further unlawful activity or you will face charges. If you are arrested, you may be released on bail depending on factors contained in Part 16. That's right. I read Roman numerals of the Criminal Code. People of Ottawa are being denied the lawful use, enjoyment, and operation of property, and you're causing businesses to close. This doesn't even seem like it's Ottawa. I wouldn't believe that. Scroll down. Is there a signature or anything at the bottom? Oh, we have a crest. It's not signed by anybody. So personally, I wouldn't believe it. I bet you that that's just something that they put out unofficially to scare people. I don't believe it. I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you either way, but I wouldn't believe it. We're in this era, Lewis, where everything's pretty much a lie. Doug Ford's doing I'm going to say a 720. Like Tony Hawk maybe did the first 580. I don't even remember. 500 in the bowl. Yeah, I remember. I'm young too. Tony Hawk, very, very relevant political reference. So the Ottawa police chief retired, I believe, just the other day. So, pardon? Yes, he's just saying this guy can't stop talking back there. You know, Lewis. So things are crazy right now, and I think if people knew about this 20 MP, 10 senators things, that they'd be a bit more up in arms. Now, I was watching the House of Commons the other day while they voted to end the federal mandates. Of course, like I mentioned, NDP, Liberals all voted on one way, and the Bloc Québécois, the French, and the Conservatives voted the other way. It was very interesting to see. And the problem I take is there's no individualism at all. We all get together as parties and say, we're going to say this thing. So the Conservatives come out, say, how dare you? They all make their little speeches so that they can clip it for their YouTube channels, of course. Who wouldn't? Liberals come back and say, this is for the safety of Canadians. What are you guys talking about? You guys don't care about our safety. These illegal blockades, we have to end them. Okay, you got your bit out. The Bloc Québécois come out and they say, why was this your first measure? Why didn't you go talk to them? Why didn't you do this, that, and the other? Emergencies Act is your first thing to do. Okay. But then you have the NDP come up. And like I mentioned, 2 weeks ago, they said we need a plan to come out of the mandates. But the NDP are all sitting at home. They're reading off their computers, poorly, might I add. and they're saying everybody's a terrorist. The NDP comes on and say there's a militia in Alberta. This woman from Edmonton says. This other guy, I think it was Kitchener, he says, oh, this, that, and the other. Basically, their whole talking point there was about it being so dangerous, terrorist this, militia that, completely nonsensical stuff. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Each group has their own talking point. And then they just, like clockwork, they all just move on to the economy and inflation. And that's when you get people standing up there reading off of sheets. And I'm thinking, as a Canadian citizen, that if it was my job to represent my constituents in front of the country, in front of the world, I don't think that it would look good upon me if I was reading off a sheet all day. If I had to look up a statistic on the piece of paper, that's one thing. But a person standing there and being like, Mr. Speaker, I think this, that, and the other, the economy this, and, inflation that, I don't think that looks good. I don't think it looks good when anybody has to read off of a piece of paper at their job, because you should know this stuff. And that's when it became unwatchable to me. It just seemed like a bunch of parrots talking. And my point here is that there's so little individualism that how can we trust any of these politicians? Everybody who gets out of line gets kicked out of the party, or they leave the party. You can't have individual thoughts. It's all about this, towing the party line. And I'm sick of it, and I think most people are. And this is why you can't trust any of these parties. I mean, you've got a conservative up there saying, Justin Trudeau and Speaker Chrystia Freeland, your inflation's through the roof. You never balance the budget. And then she comes back at them. And I don't like this woman at all, Chrystia Freeland. And she comes back and says, well, your plan, you just had a leader that had a plan to spend more than we do. And she completely owned them. And it's just like, reminds the people that just a few weeks ago, your policies were the same as the Liberals. And now all of a sudden, everybody's different. Doug Ford's completely different. All of a sudden, the Conservatives have a new leader, and they're supposed to be completely different. What system and what message can we do moving forward? Is it, people who are independents? Do we have to vote on everything? We have an opt-in, opt-out tax style. We can't get to any of these things because we're so caught up. Now it's an Emergencies Act. Now if you give somebody political dollars, you might be considered a terrorist. It's all this stuff. They keep stopping us from progressing forward, and I think people are having a hard time with believing any of these people because nothing ever gets done. For better or for worse, you had Trump in office. He actually got things done, whether you agreed with it or not. I don't trust any of them, Lewis. I don't know what it's like on your side of the pond. Boris seems to have gone and done his own 180 in the past few months. Do you get the feeling that people in the UK feel the same way, where they don't really trust any of these politicians? Or do you have these people who are just like, this is the real Conservative Party, they're doing the right thing now, I'm going to stick with them? Because I know people who say, now that Pierre Poilievre is in office, or he's in the leadership of the party, now we can vote for them, now is the time.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that trust has diminished because, as we know, I'm not quite sure, not very clued up on Canadian side of politics, but in our sort of political realm, it's mostly based on party loyalty. So, say Boris Johnson would pick his cabinet, and it would be based on loyalty as opposed to competence and getting the job done. It's all about who is on my side. So it was quite a strange thing to see 126 Tories vote against what he proposed back in November and December with the old V passes. So you are starting to see a bit more of character from other MPs, especially backbenchers, who I think are the real MVPs. They're the most valuable people because in my understanding is they're the ones that can challenge and can kind of criticize as well. So that's what I'm seeing. But at the same time, like we just said earlier, it's very, very difficult to trust politicians from their track records and, the flip-flopping and who's really in charge. And you can go down that rabbit hole and, is it the unions? Is it the civil service? Is it all these different organizations and bodies? And just to go back on what we were touching on before, producer ADMIA actually confirmed that notice from the police is actually real. So I think maybe we could delve into that a little bit more. I cannot read that, unfortunately. I don't know if you could do. Here we go.
Let's pick up where we left off.
You do that.
The Federal Emergencies Act allows for the regulation or prohibition of travel to, from, or within any specified area. That means anyone coming to Ottawa for the purpose of joining an ongoing demonstration is breaking the law. So basically, martial law. Like it says, you can prohibit travel to and from anywhere, any specified area. You can't come here. We're just going to reject you from coming into the city now. This is what Justin Trudeau has put us in. This is what he signed into law, possibly in blackface at the time, while he was signing the order. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, you think it's so dangerous at these protests, yet you can't show me any violence. Even when CNN is showing the protest, they can only show people dancing, waving flags. And this is how dangerous it is. A lot of people, especially disappointingly to me on the conservative side, are just they're so quick to jump to the trade at the border being stifled. Of course, that's a bad thing. But how come the government gets to be the one to decide when it's a bad thing or not? So for 2 years, they shut down businesses. For 2 years, they tell you can't work, this and that. They raid, Doug Ford himself raids a barbecue restaurant. In Alberta, Jason Kenney's raiding, gas station stops, the Whistle Stop Cafe, and churches. Pastors go to jail. That's all fine for 2 years. The government decides that. The government decides, we don't need that money. We don't need all these businesses' money. Then people block a bridge, and all of a sudden the government says, oh no, we need all the money, you're affecting jobs. So why is it that only the government can crush people and say that you don't get to decide when things are being blocked? Only we get to decide when things are being blocked. So I was having this conversation with Zuby yesterday about the amount of people that don't actually believe in liberty or freedom. So in Canada, if you're okay with the government telling you when you can work, et cetera, and then the people don't get a say of when things can be closed down because they have clear and concise demands of drop the mandates, then I'm supposing that you don't exactly believe in personal freedom or liberty. There's Zuby, What Happened to Canada. Shout out to him. He's on that episode will air next week on Rebel News Plus. But why don't you believe that I'm not asking you to be an anarchist. I'm asking you to say, why does the government get to decide this without you? And when the people who are supposed to be the employers of the government, they're taking our money, why don't we get to tell them when we want something shut down in such a massive protest? Now, I don't want to get into this world where, somebody can block the entrance to a mall and say all of a sudden, okay, we disagree with the mall going down. But at what point is the government's enforcement too much? And I think that's what we've gotten to, whereas people agree. Hundreds of thousands of people show up for a protest. It means they agree on, a large percentage of people agree on something. There's verified rebel writer Dakota Christensen, who says big government. There's criminal lawyer David Amber.
I'll tell you what.
Right, said Fred.
I'll tell you what.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, right, said Fred. Good for them. That's quality. I think Jordan Peterson hit the nail on the head. If you can find his quote tweet on that particular tweet, I reshared that earlier, actually, because it perfectly sums up not just Canada, but the West in general, because it's happening here too. And Jordan Peterson laid it out completely. And, there is that question, what has happened? And I think a lot of people, I think it's like trying to boil pasta and you've overdone it and it starts to simmer over. I think that's kind of how people are feeling. I think that's the best, metaphorically, you can attribute that to. But yeah, here it is. So yeah, hate speech laws, group rights, DEI, naive economics. Sorry, I can't see because of that. Yeah, economic policy, compelled environmental utopianism, activist universities. There's loads. Yeah, civic disengagement, state media collusion, vicious feminism.
So this is just a list of everything that's happened to Canada. And I'd like us to start pulling away from YouTube so I can talk about the rest of the stuff that Doug Ford said. But in the meantime, the towing industry, and this was predicted, and Lewis, how much I hate to tell writer Dave that he's right. But Dave correctly predicted that after the towing companies all said, no, we're not going to take away these trucks, the government had to be like, well, how are we going to get stuff out of there? People said the military. I told you guys it wasn't going to happen. It didn't happen. They said the Americans were going to come take it away. I told you that wasn't going to happen. It didn't happen. But what they can do with the Emergencies Act is they can now force you to work for them. This is the stupidity of allowing this to happen. NDP, you could have stopped it, but you're communist, so you don't. So now they can tell tow truck drivers, listen, if you don't tow stuff away from us, you're now committing an offense and we can arrest you because this is basically martial law. Martial law in quotes, but it's kind of a form of it. Ottawa will see pushback, says the Globe and Mail, if tow trucks are forced to clear blockades, towing industry says. Now, of course, I have a problem with saying towing industry says. What if I said baking industry says? You can't just ask two guys and say that's the industry. Did you get, even if it's a union that's not the industry, you can say so-and-so says. But, of course, they want you to click on it. I digress. But they can now force you to tow things for them. How stupid is that? I can force you to work for me, and if you don't, then you're committing a crime and we can arrest you. What is this, 1937 or 1938? You must turn your factory into producing bullets for the Great War, or else we're going to arrest you and put you in prison. That's what this is. If you do not put your pedal to the metal for the government, we will arrest you. Okay, what's to stop them from going, hey, townspeople in Coots, Alberta, if you don't go to the border and help us move these people away, then you're getting arrested. They could literally do that. I don't think they will, but what's to stop? If they can literally force you to do something for them, and if you refuse, you're in trouble, then what does that mean? That means they can do anything to you. They can draft you. They can do anything. That's literally what it means, and that's why people are so outraged. That's why even Quebec is saying, we don't really want any part of this, because the Bloc Québécois would like to be reelected. They see the tide's turning on Trudeau. Everybody's turning on him. I don't know what they gave Jagmeet, maybe a comb, a beard comb, and I could use one at the office. Maybe they gave him that, and that, that convinced him. Maybe they gave him a new Ferrari. Jagmeet likes shiny cars. Quebec's National Assembly officially rejects use of Emergency Act. Can they do that? How powerful are provincial rights in Canada? Not that powerful. But that's just a bold statement that they're coming out against Trudeau, against their own kind, against my kind, Lewis. But I digress. Again, as producer Efron would say, are we away from YouTube yet? We're going to remind them where they can go. Thank you. That's why you're the producer and I'm the charlatan in front of the camera. We can remind them to go to Rumble, Super U, Odyssey, and Getter. And you can always go to rebelnews.com/livestream to get one of the feeds on the non-censorious platforms that we all love. Rumble, you can send Rumble rants. Super, you can send super hellos. I don't remember what it's called. Odyssey is hyper chats.
Hello.
Super hellos is what I'm going with. Maybe they should change it to that. Super you. And then Getter, I believe, is coming out with that, but they don't have it now. But we appreciate their mostly free speech platform. Thank you to Getter.com. Do we have any chats we want to get to now, or should we wait? Oh. Okay, we'll come back to chats.